Wow. You're going to get us into trouble with this, Tom.
I certainly hope so.
Tom, you sent me an email the other day that blew my mind, and I was so delighted to get it because it opened up this whole doorway that we have on our channel here talking about ham radio culture. Ham radio culture. Nobody else would go where we go. And in that crazy email that you sent me, you said, there are two kinds of hams. And I said, what do you mean? What do you mean, man? What two kinds of hams? And then you laid out the language. And what did you tell me in that email?
Well, basically that after reviewing some of the comments we've received on our videos, that I had the epiphany that there's two subcultures within ham radio. And there's one subculture that's I'm going to call them the Orthodox, or maybe better, the gatekeepers. And then there's everybody else. And I'm going to call those the adventurers. And the orthodoxy within a culture, whether it's religious, philosophical, social, can be both a destabilizing and a limiting effect depending on one's perspective.
Orthodox.
Now,
I hear that word used a lot in theology. I write a lot in the area of theology and philosophy. In fact, I'm here taking a very orthodox position because I'm right next to my theology and philosophy books. All right. I'm not in this shack. A truly orthodox YouTube video should be in the shack, and then you should have all your rubber duckies lined up behind you with the antennas shooting up into the heavens. That's ham radio YouTube orthodoxy. And I am very unorthodox in my way here, and you're unorthodox in yours. So orthodox, some people would call that traditionalism.
Right.
Traditionalism. In fact, I've got a great quote from you from a theologian. Where's he from? I think he was a Czech or Ukrainian theologian. I can't remember now, but somebody will correct me. Yeah, probably not on this video, but it's Yaroslav Pelikan. And he said, talking about these differences, he said, traditionalism is the dead faith of the living, and tradition is the living faith of the dead. And I was thinking about that the other day, Tom, because I was looking at the map that you can get online where you look at all the hams in your area.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so I went into my zip code and I was looking and clicking on the hams, and within about a 3-mile radius, there was maybe 15, and only 3 of them on the QRZ site had hardly any views at all, suggesting all of the rest of them were dead, not literally deceased, but inactive. Like at a church, you'd say, well, they don't come anymore. They're inactive.
Right.
But you use the word adventurer versus orthodox. What are you thinking is the difference between those two in ham radio?
Well, the orthodox I consider as the gatekeepers versus the adventurers. And the gatekeepers are the orthodox, the static, unswerving from their faiths. Nobody can do anything outside of the framework that they hold true. But the adventurers, those are those that are just in it for the enjoyment of exploring others within their culture, their subcultures, seeking new pathways, traveling roads unknown. But they're held up and resisted by the gatekeepers. And I can see new potential hams are hesitant to enter Hamdenville due to the optics that they'll be treated with either rudeness or humiliated by the gatekeepers. And I came to the conclusion that the gatekeepers are the most concerned about the death of ham radio are the ones that are implementing the demise of ham radio.
Oh, and they are doing so because they're so inflexible about what the hobby is and how you operate and what kind of equipment. Is that the kind of thing you're getting at?
Exactly. Or you didn't get here via the same path I took.
Ah,
Uh, and I could, speaking as old as we are, let's face it. I mean, we came up through a very different path than the new procedures are. I mean, we talk about going downtown Chicago to the Federal Building and the snow in January and having to sit amongst a bunch of old ogres doing ham 20 word a minute CW tests and then sweating through the written exam. And in the Quinn, that was 60 years ago. Times have changed. Okay. We can't hold new hams to the same standards we had to go through.
hmm.
The game has changed. So why should we be
Yeah.
so why should be we should be pushing our traditional thoughts and processes on somebody coming up on the more modern streamlined process?
Wow. You're going to get us into trouble with this, Tom.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah. So, but let me add two things here just to see what you think. The first is making the analogy again with religion. So you sometimes will have, let's say, a tradition or a denomination that has certain beliefs and certain practices, and you have to abide exactly by those, or you better find a different church, right?
Right. Right.
So here you're saying you better abide by the way we, as the gatekeepers, think about the hobby, or find a different hobby. We don't want you here. Okay.
Okay.
So that's one way to think about it. Now, the other way to think about it is that the variety is good. In other words, it's great to have old fogies with traditional ways of thinking in the hobby as part of the hobby, as long as they realize that that is just one denomination in the bigger church. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, you've got to have some freedom. You got to have some movement or you just stagnate. And that's where the adventurers come in. They're testing new modes, they're testing new processes, they're testing new possibilities. They're looking at things that may not even exist yet, but they're working towards it and experimenting. And the fluidity of that is what's going to lead to an increase in interest in the hobby. And you're right, it's one church, so to speak, but not everybody has to maintain the same absolute standard, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. So again, everybody, we're talking about an analogy here. The Orthodox and the adventurers who are going beyond what traditional ways of defining the hobby are, traditional activities in the hobby. This is interesting, Tom, because you and I have this channel going here on YouTube, and you and I sometimes go out and we dip into other ham radio YouTube channels just to see what other people are doing. And the YouTube channels that are growing, unlike ours, where they have all kinds of people signing up, subscribing down below, and then they create a thumbnail and they've got their face smiling with rubber ducky and they're pointing to something. All of that stuff. They're younger people and they're attracting a lot of people. And here's the thing. They are this is controversial. They are radio universalists. In other words, if it deals with radio in some regard, they might talk about it and accept it and enjoy it, have fun with it. So they're going to talk about ham radio, but they're also going to talk maybe about CB radio. Oh, God forbid, CB radio. Or they may talk about GMRS, or they might talk just about shortwave listening or medium wave listening. Or they might talk about satellites, like the video we did recently with Gabe, and I'll put a link down below, which has attracted a lot of views because He is an adventurer who's hacking into all these satellites. Okay. Even that word hack, I think for some, the more traditional hams might not be something that they like.
Right. Quinn, you mentioned church. And you have to remember that the church is just a building. Okay. You cannot confine yourself to just the state of that building. When you walk out of that church door, or you're walking into that church door, you're coming from a vast array of nature, of all kinds of possibilities, of everything. So to hold yourself within that temple, that church, is just restricting your view and your whole viewpoint.
And so there are people who come into the hobby, they get excited, they may get turned off because it seems like they're being railroaded into certain ways of thinking about the hobby and certain things to do. And in the hobby, people around them don't seem to be very encouraging or interested in what they themselves are interested in if it's a little bit different. Same thing applies. Let's now take it to clubs. You and I did some videos on ham radio clubs and which ones are growing and which ones are not. And that's an interesting thing because the clubs who are still doing the same things, the same ways that they were 40 years ago are not growing.
No.
And the clubs that are saying, hey, this is going to be an exciting, interesting place. Welcome aboard. We're going to look at new things in the hobby, new kinds of equipment, new kinds of practices. We're going to do fox hunts in ways we haven't before, or we're going to do some satellite communication. Maybe even we're going to get on some very high frequencies that not many hams are on yet. But we're going to have some fun, and we're going to bring speakers in who challenge us to think in new ways about the hobby, challenge the culture. Well, the thing about this, Tom, is that the hardest thing for all of us as human beings is to be open to different ways of doing things.
Right.
All of us. Our natural tendency as human beings, I know this from the research on this in my field of communication, is for us all to be able to want things to be the way they've always been. We want orthodoxy in a sense. We don't want the adventurers out there because the adventurers threaten us. All right. And so keep things the way they are. And that's tough to attract people into a hobby if we try to keep things too much. Yet the Orthodox folks have wisdom, they have experience within their domain. And that should be part of what makes the hobby great too, and how we put those together. The Orthodox person, the adventurer together, carrying forward, creating new traditions. Man, that's the future of the hobby.
Right. And once a cultural ideological transformation reaches a certain tipping point, the resistance begins to fade, not necessarily because the belief systems vanish, but because they adjust to a acquired existence outside the mainstream. And sometimes this leads to a formation of subcultures where traditionalists maintain their views without actively challenging change. Other times, orthodoxy resurfaces later in response to, perceived excesses of adaptability. And ham radio always contain both cultures. The question is, which one do you embrace?
And so there's not something wrong with one or the other as long as we provide space.
Right.
And appreciate each other. So somebody in the hobby, let's say, who's really into the old tradition practice of Morse code, CW, da 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 da, and so forth, they're really into that. That's great. But to look down at somebody who operates sideband or FM, or if you're a traditionalist with respect to HF is the core, the center of the hobby, And now you've got these people moving not in just into UHF and VHF, but man, they're going in these high frequencies, where they're lucky to get 300 yards, and you say, that's not ham radio. What's going on?
You go into the DMR.
You go into DMR.
That's not ham radio. Of course, it's ham radio.
Yeah, in fact,
it's just a different part of the spectrum.
Yes, you and I have been on DMR lately and talking with people who are big fans of it. And some of those people have told us that hams in the area where they live, including in the clubs, tell them that stuff using computers and going through the internet, that's not real ham radio. See, they're the orthodox there that are trying to be the gatekeepers.
Right.
Well, Tom, you've really opened up a great topic. I hope people will post comments down below. Tell us, where do you think the Orthodox folks are and the adventurers are in the hobby? How have your experiences been? Do you see yourself as more of one or the other? I think, Tom, you and I have always been a bit of both.
And, of course.
Yeah. And that makes us the self-righteous people in the religion of ham radio. We are among the saints in this hobby. We open all doors, and in fact, we don't mind if people listen to our YouTube channel or watch and post comments, even if they don't have a license. Whoa.
Ooh.
And they're on GMRS or CB. Come on in. Taste the sweetness of the whole hobby, and then come in the door, get that little exam. It's not that hard with the local club. If you got a bunch of fuddy-duddies at your club, find a few other adventurers in town and join along and help make the hobby great, because it's a wonderful hobby. Tom, you're a genius for coming up with this topic. Thanks, buddy.
Well, I'm more than happy to have the platform to present it.
Yeah. This is the way you and I have always been with each other, have these great discussions next to my theology and philosophy books here. So thanks, everybody. On this channel, Ham Radio Perspectives, we offer perspectives, okay? We don't claim to have everything exactly right. We hope that you'll offer your perspectives as well and join us. My name is Quinn, and my call is Kilo 8 Queen Sugar.
And I am Tom, WA9TDD.
Thanks for joining us, and don't forget to comment, everybody.